Okay, folks, first things first. Well, first things first. I shaved. Thoughts? You gotta like it or else I'll cry. Okay, I wanna get something out of the way first. This movie kind of brought it on, so I just wanna get it out of the way. Most movie reviewers have what's called a spectrum, right? Movies that they didn't like, movies that they loved, and then movies that are kind of in the middle for them. I have started reviewing movies at a very interesting time because basically every movie I've seen so far, I liked a lot. That said, the drama was excellent. Let's get into it. This movie was written and directed by Christopher Borgli. It comes in at about an hour and 40 minutes, and it is starring the excellent Robert Pattinson and the fantastic Zendaya. And someone who really blew me away, but I'll get into that, Mamadou Ahdi. I pray I'm pronouncing his name correctly. If I'm not, I am so sorry. As I usually do, I like to start with the things that I didn't love as much and then get into the things I did like a lot. So let's get into stuff I didn't like as much. Starting, I wanted more good time with Robert Pattinson and Zendaya's character. No spoilers, but I'm sure you can tell from the cover and the trailers and everything that they're together in this film. And I think the time that they were good before the conflict of the movie began was a little short. I loved watching them on screen when they were firing off each other. The chemistry was really solid, and I thought they were playing off of each other extremely well as a couple who really loved each other, and I just would have loved to seen that a little bit more. Secondly, characters who aren't the main characters, I wish they got a little bit more of a storyline payoff to them having some sort of moral high ground. This movie touches on a lot of controversial sort of themes, and there are some characters in this that are, I think, written inherently unlikable. And it feels like they didn't really get that payoff in the story as much as the writers were sort of relying on the audience to sort of give them that punishment themselves. So I would have liked to seen a little bit more of them having actual ramifications for the actions that they have. And last thing I wish was a little bit different or was added more was the wedding planning portion of things. Again, as you can see from the trailers and from the cover photos and everything like that, this takes place around a wedding. Now, not at the wedding specifically, but around it. I loved the moments where they were doing wedding stuff. Like you see in the trailer where they're getting their photos done and stuff like that. There's a good amount of stuff in this movie where they were sort of going through the trials and tribulations of planning a wedding while also dealing with the main conflict of this movie, and it really added a fantastic aspect to a movie I've never really seen before, and I wanted to see more of that. It was excellent for the amount that was in it, but I just would have liked to see a bit more. Okay, now things I really liked about this movie and or loved. Narrowing it down is extremely difficult, which is a really good problem to have with a movie, but I'm going to try anyway. To start, the comedy, which is crazy to say because if you read into what happens in this movie, no spoilers, me saying that probably sounds insane. However, there is moments of this movie that are hilarious, and I think what feeds into them is that this movie isn't necessarily written or pushed as a comedy. How do I mean by that? There are a lot of dramatic themes and a lot of dramatic scenes and lots of dramatic acting inside of this movie that when the comedy is happening, it almost makes it so natural that you're almost watching human reaction in front of you, which inherently gives you that laughing at a funeral type of sense of humor where you're just I don't know if I should be laughing right now, but for some reason this is hilarious. And I think if that was written purposely, whoa, well done. If it's not, and it's just happenstance that the audience that I was in was sort of doing that nervous laugh, even better. I think the comedy really worked in this movie, especially if it was intentional. I think a lot of really good moments happened with both Zendaya and Robert Pattinson, but heavily on Robert Pattinson, where my theater was roaring, which was fantastic. Second thing I loved about this movie, the cinematography. My God, this movie was shot beautifully. Also edited wonderfully. There was a lot of shots in this movie that felt very grounded and very personal. It felt like I was in the room with the characters, or I could have even been one of the characters experiencing something happening in real time, which, a lot of cinematographers strive for but don't always succeed in. it really worked in this one. It really felt like I was along for the ride, like I was a bug on the wall, which was awesome. Not always awesome. There was a lot of uncomfortable scenes where I wish I could have left, but that's also an excellent addition to this, where you're feeling that only because of how well it is shot and how well it is edited. That said, the editing, there was a lot of things in this movie where if you blink, you miss it, and not in like a Easter egg way. You see a shot of something, and if you missed it, it sets up a point, or it sets up a joke, or it sets up a story beat that if you didn't see it, you might miss that, which some people can consider maybe a little bit risky. I thought it was an excellent payoff to being able to sort of be fully involved with this movie, which it really grabs you pretty much immediately. But it's kind of like a little bit of a reward for staying really in depth with the movie. Obviously, the number one thing I love was the performances. I'm going to start with Robert because, truthfully, he was fantastic. I have seen him play a lot of roles. I've seen him play variations of similar roles to this. The thing with this character that I really liked that he did with, like what he did with it was a perfect combination of grounded, chaotic, empathetic, and just inherently earnest, to a point where if you were to combine those things in most characters for most actors to take on, they would have an extremely hard time balancing all of those characteristics and character traits. Robert nails it. He truly knocks it out of the park. He creates such a character that you can both see yourself in and sort of be like, God, I feel for this guy. Kind of, not really, but yes, he does a really good job of juggling the moral ambiguity of his character. Speaking of moral ambiguity, Zendaya. Listen, she's fantastic. I have never doubted Zendaya's skill. However, this movie for me solidified that she is a juggernaut. She is truly someone to really look for. She really had to carry, for what I've seen for the first time, a movie on her shoulders, and it was predominantly on her shoulders. Robert also played a massive role, but everything I've seen her in up to this point, it was very much ensemble. So like The Show, most movies she's been in, there was a pretty big cast supporting her. This movie, it was her and Robert. That's it. They had to carry this story. So when it wasn't Robert, it was her. And she had to make sure that this movie moved along just as quick as when it was with Robert. She did a fantastic job. She truly blew me out of the water. I think this was probably my favorite performance of hers. And again, like I said at the beginning, Mamoudou Athie, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He plays the best friend of Robert Pattinson in the movie. If you look in the trailers, you can kind of spot him briefly. He had to go toe-to-toe with Robert in probably one of Robert's best performances in his career that I've seen. And he did it with ease. He was keeping up like you wouldn't believe. He was so engaging to watch. I wanted to see more of his character. I wanted to get more an in-depth reason as to why he was sticking so close to Robert this whole movie. I loved the whole best friend relationship between the two of them. I wanted to see more. I wanted to see more of that character. So whatever that guy is in, I'm going to watch anything. I loved watching that guy on screen. He was a natural. Okay, and as per usual, fun fact. Fun fact. Zendaya and Robert Pattinson rehearsed for this movie for 2 weeks before cameras started rolling, which for folks who don't know too much about movies, that's an insane amount of time to rehearse for a film. And apparently it is because they had a major role in both the writing and the general development of the film. Apparently, Christopher, Robert, and Zendaya, for those 2 weeks, basically just workshopped this script, top to bottom. And Robert and Zendaya had a lot of input on how this final project turned out. And you can really tell by their performances why it feels so comfortable for them to sort of be in this movie, because they had such a big role inside of it. That said, again, like I said at the beginning, I feel like I'm going to give a lot of these until I don't, but I would absolutely see this movie in theater 4 times. It was just fantastic. It is obviously a movie that is taking a really big swing on some things that maybe not a lot of folks will be able to find any sort of humor or any sort of purpose in and why it's being conveyed this way. However, for me, it really worked, and I really enjoyed this movie. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.